In the aftermath of the Second World War, the world was in disarray. Europe lay in ruins, and communism loomed over the continent. In fact, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged from World War II as the global superpowers. It was in this tumultuous time that the United States embarked on a foreign policy that would shape the course of the 20th century, which historians refer to as the Truman Doctrine. In this video, we explore its history and importance. The Truman Doctrine was a significant aspect of the history of the Cold War, which took place from approximately 1945 until 1990. In general, the Cold War was a period of increased tensions and hostility between the superpowers of the United States and the Soviet Union. These heightened tensions between the two nations emerged following the destruction of Nazi Germany in World War II. In fact, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies during the Second World War, alongside Britain. Together, the three nations and their other allies freed Europe from Nazi control. However, this led to a new development. More specifically, the Soviet Union, under the leadership of Joseph Stalin, captured and retained control over the European territory that they liberated from Nazi Germany. United States President Harry S. Truman, along with others, viewed this as a threat to the democratic world because they feared the spread of communism throughout Europe. In response, Truman argued that the United States and its allies should actively combat the spread of communism wherever it emerges. This policy became known as the Truman Doctrine and was followed by the United States throughout the course of the Cold War. In general, historians refer to this as containment, because the Truman Doctrine involved the United States trying to contain Soviet expansionism wherever it emerged. In fact, on March 12, 1947, President Truman addressed a joint session of Congress, outlining what would become known as the Truman Doctrine. In his speech, Truman made it clear that the United States would provide assistance to all democratic nations under threat from external or internal authoritarian forces.
At the present moment, in world history, nearly every nation must choose between alternative ways of life. The choice is too often not a free one. One way of life is based upon the will of the majority and is distinguished by free institutions, representative government, free elections, guarantees of individual liberty, freedom of speech and religion, and freedom from political oppression. The second way of life is based upon the will of a minority, forcibly imposed upon the majority. It relies upon terror and oppression, controlled press and radio, fixed elections, and the suppression of personal freedoms. I believe that it must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. I believe that we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way. I believe that our help should be primarily through economic and financial aid, which is essential to economic stability and orderly political processes.
The Truman Doctrine marked a significant departure from America's traditional isolationist stance. It signaled the country's commitment to containing the spread of communism and supporting nations in their struggle for self-determination. One of the earliest tests of the Truman Doctrine came during the Berlin Blockade and airlift of 1948. When the Soviet Union blockaded West Berlin, the United States and its allies responded with a massive airlift, delivering food and supplies to the besieged city. Stalin hoped the blockade would give him control over West Berlin, which had been under the leadership of American, British, and French forces. However, Truman and other leaders ordered the airlift to prevent the city from falling to communism and Soviet control. In fact, by the spring of 1949, when it became clear that the Allies would stand firm and not give in to Stalin's tactics, the Soviets eventually decided to lift the blockade. As a result, the Allies maintained control over their sectors of Berlin. The Truman Doctrine also set the stage for American intervention in the Korean War. In 1950, when North Korea invaded South Korea, the United States intervened to defend South Korea, signaling its commitment to containing communist aggression. For example, President Truman hoped that preventing the emergence of communism in Korea would stop it from spreading to other nearby nations in the South Pacific. This also set the stage for the events of the Vietnam War in the decades that followed. Regardless, the Truman Doctrine and its focus on containing Soviet expansionism formed the basis for a large portion of the United States' foreign policy throughout the 20th century. For instance, it influenced wars, trade agreements, aid packages, and alliances. As a result, the legacy of the Truman Doctrine endures to this day. For example, it laid the groundwork for the formation of NATO and other alliances that continue to shape global security.